Good evening, everyone. If you can hear me, can I have a thumbs up, please? Great. It is nice to see everyone at the Zendo and also people from all over the country, in fact, joining us online. My name is Fugan, and it is really a pleasure to be here with you. I'm joining from Hyannis Zendo on Cape Cod. This is the Village Zendo franchise. And we are now about 2 weeks and a couple days into our winter Ango. This is our period of intensified practice that runs for 3 months. And it's a time where we commit to deepen our practice. We have the support of the community, of the Village Zendo organizers and teachers, of our practice leader, our Shuso. And it's a great time to take advantage of that container that we build together so we can really be present to our lives, so we can be of service as the needs arise, as they are doing all the time. And so tonight, I want to return to our practice period study text, Dōgen's instructions for the cook. And this text focuses on the Tenzo, which is the cook in a Zen monastery. And the service position of Tenzo, as Dōgen describes it, is intense. It's full-time. It's an all-consuming endeavor. And Dōgen paints this comprehensive picture of the cook's activities. It's within the rigid and structured environment of a medieval Japanese monastery. And if you remember, Dōgen lived in the first half of the 13th century. And so he weaves in stories from his own interactions with Chinese Tenzos during his travels and his studies. And he also adds in stories from the Zen literature, the Zen lore that goes back centuries in Chinese history. Huishan, Suifang, and Dongshan are among the great Tenzos of the past who appear in this text. And although it's distant in time and setting, the job description that Dōgen lays out in his instructions for the cook is not so different from being Tenzo on summer retreats with the Village Zendo. Seiki, Tokyu, Daikin, and Chodo were some of the past Tenzos who really rolled up their sleeves for the community. Their work was very much like Dōgen's ideal Tenzo that he described. It was ongoing. The cycle from one day and night always began the night before with a survey of what was in the fridge, what was stored in the basement, what was going bad, what needed to be used. They woke up early and worked all day, throughout the day, using the ingredients at hand to nourish the community as we sat meditation in our rickety and crowded temple up there along the Hudson River. I know some of us miss it. Some of us don't. Their practice as Tenzos was kitchen practice. And for many summers, I also had the opportunity to work in the kitchen. And Dōgen's text was helpful for me in experiencing this challenge, this challenging position as a training opportunity, rather than only a hot, sticky, and exhausting chore. Or as Dōgen put it, a vain struggle and hardship without benefit in the end. And while it was nevertheless always hot, sticky, and exhausting, it was an exertion of the way, a practice of the way. And so on this really cold night in January, all of us in our warm or at least warmish spaces, connecting through this everyday technology, what we consider everyday, even though it's really miraculous. The life of the Tenzo Dogen's describing seems quite distant. You know, even the Grail at this point seems quite distant. And while Dogen's connections might have, while Dogen's text might seem connected to the Tenzo's job in a contemporary Zen community, and what do they really have to do with our everyday lives? And this is a question I heard asked throughout our session I guess now about 9 days ago. This question was addressed in the teachers' talks, came up in interviews, and it was my question. And really, I think it's the central issue. Right? What does Dogen's text have to do with our everyday lives? And I can ask rhetorically, what is exactly as all-consuming and full-time as being Tenzo? What is as all-consuming as and full-time as the job of Tenzo as Dōgen describes it? And my answer would be your life, my life. Everyone's life is their full-time, all-consuming service position. Our lives are our full-time endeavors of the way. And so in the evenings, Seijin, who's a nurse practitioner who takes care of a large immigrant community, always looks over her charts for the patients she's scheduled to care for the next day. In this act, she is the Tenzo, putting together the ingredients for the next day's meal. And when our Sangha member Michael created our beautiful new Han out of a piece of wood he cut from a fallen tree, he transformed this very humble ingredient, actually this literal obstacle, into the finest of offerings for the community. When we visit or call on a sick Sangha member, a community member, when a friend texts to check in, when we consciously reduce our consumption and live a greener life, these are all opportunities to act in ways that are, like the Tenzo Dōgen describes, nourishing the community. In the Tenzo Kyokun, that's the name of the text, I think Dōgen is offering us a guide that can help us beautifully inhabit the service position that is our life. And so what I'd like to focus on tonight is Dōgen's teaching of Sanshin, or three minds. And this teaching is articulated clearly in the last paragraphs of the text, but it underlies all the details of the Tenzo's actions that Dōgen talks about. And I think this can guide us in integrating and fully inhabiting our own lives, our own actions. And the three minds are daishin, vast mind, rōshin, nurturing mind, and kishin, joyful mind. And rather than thinking of these as states that we can somehow attain, I think these three minds are better understood as expressions of our practice. And we could even call them practices of true expression. Shin, this is the second character in all three of these words, is the character for mind. And as many of you know, the kanji, the Japanese pictogram for Shin, developed from a pictograph of a heart. And in it, you could see the chambers of the heart and an artery coming into it. And the term translates as mind or heart, or maybe better yet, heart-mind. And it points to a holistic way of understanding ourselves, not limited to, but also not excluding our intellect and our emotions, our empathy and our compassion. And the character Shin also carries the meaning of spirit or center, our core. And so daishin translates as vast heart or vast mind. It can also be translated as magnanimous mind or big mind. And the first character, the dai of daishin, looks like a person with their feet spread wide apart and their arms outstretched and their head upright. It's as if this person is reaching out in all directions. And Dōgen describes daishin as vast, vast like a great expanse of ocean. And this vast is vast not in a relative way. It's not relatively bigger than something else. Right? If it were relative, vastness would always be outpaced by something even more vast, something bigger. Right? Daishin is the heart mind that meets the moment without hindrance, without boundaries. So what does that mean? The practice of daishin is encountering each moment as it arises, each nen after nen after nen, without attaching to our likes and dislikes, without clinging to good and bad, letting go of our stuckness. And Dōgen tells us not to, for example, disdain wild grasses or inexpensive foods, when that's what we have to make a soup. And he says, don't cling to the finest of ingredients. Approach each one as it is, sincerely and wholeheartedly. And this is the action of daishin in the kitchen. In case 23 from the Mumonkan, the sixth patriarch describes this mind quite succinctly. Monk Myo is pleading with the sixth patriarch to teach him the Dharma. The sixth patriarch, named Huineng, replies to Myo saying, think neither good nor evil. At such a moment, what is the true self of monk Myo? And hearing this, Myo was at once enlightened. Dōgen describes vast heart or daishin as the most inclusive view in which nothing is left out. It doesn't regard a gram as too light or 5 kilos as too heavy. We don't consider one thing too meager and the other one too excessive. Each thing is fully and completely its own, occupying its own Dharma position. The Zen expression, a duck's legs are short, a crane's legs are long, points right at this. Enkyo Roshi has noted that each of us, each and every Dharma is uniquely positioned. She said, the unique qualities of a duck can never be confused with those of a crane. For a duck to think it's a crane is as disastrous as for me to think that your traits are better than mine or that mine are better than yours. As long as I am secure in my duckness, intimate with my duck nature, I can also be non-defensively intimate with everything, including that tall crane fishing from the shore. When Huineng, the sixth patriarch, instructs monk Myo to think neither good nor evil, he's not asking him to just be blank. He's not asking him to ignore the suffering that drove him to ask the question in the first place. After he says, think neither good nor evil, Huineng adds on, at such a moment, what is your true self? What is the true self of monk Myo? The person with their arms and legs outstretched, letting go of our clinging or rejecting, not thinking good or evil. Right? What is this encounter? Just at this moment, at just such a moment, what is your true self? This is encountering the beat up and scarred old cabbage at the bottom of the box. witnessing your anger at the brutal injustices all around us. At just such a moment, what is your true self? Practicing vast heart, vast mind encourages us to encounter each moment, each nen as it arises, without our overlay of good and bad, clinging or rejecting. All the events, activities, encounters, and moments in our lives are this arising. When we practice vast mind, when we practice it, it's called living above the tips of the 100 grasses. Or as Dōgen puts it in the Genjo Koan, the whole moon and the entire sky are reflected in dewdrops on the grass, or even in one drop of water. The depth of the drop is the height of the moon. Each reflection, however long or short its duration, manifests the vastness of the dewdrop and realizes the limitlessness of the moonlight in the sky. Each fleeting reflection in a dewdrop manifests vastness, manifests our unbound nature. So coming back to the koan, Monk Myo asks his question of the sixth patriarch after he had chased him down for 2 days on horseback. Myo was a general before he ordained as a monk, and he was a really tough character. And when he and the other monks who were studying with Daman Hongren, the fifth patriarch, learned that Hui Nang, an illiterate woodcutter with no status, who spent his time at the temple pounding rice in an outbuilding, when they found out he had been given the secret transmission and then fled in the dark of the night with the robes in the bowl of the teacher, they couldn't accept it. So they went off in hot pursuit. And Myo was the first one to catch up to Hui Nang. And he threatened him, "Give me that robe and bowl." And the sixth patriarch placed the robe and bowl on a rock and told monk Myo, "The robe and bowl symbolize trust. How can they be fought for by force?" And then when Myo went to pick them up, he just couldn't move them. And Myo became terrified, maybe by the immovability of these items. Or perhaps he saw that his own behavior, this violent pursuit of symbols of the Dharma, had so deviated from his true pursuit of the Dharma. And at that vulnerable moment, realizing his mistake, he genuinely asked Hui Nang for the teaching. And the sixth patriarch offered him the teaching of practicing vastness. In this moment, leaving aside good and evil, what is it? So every day we start off the day chanting, "Vast is the robe of liberation." And this is the same vast as in daishin. It's a formless field without comparison of good or bad. You can't pick it up because you're not separate from it. It's a field of benefaction. Right? Benefaction. Ben is good, farse doing. So doing good. We chant, "I wear the Tathagata's teaching." We activate ourselves ready to engage, ready to do good, saving all sentient beings. And Dōgen offers two more related minds of practice, rōshin and kishin, nurturing mind and joyful mind, that can help us further understand how we realize this great vow. Rōshin is translated, or rōshin, is translated as motherly heart, parental heart, or nurturing mind. And it arises naturally as our direction when we practice vastness. Each encounter, each task is an opportunity to foster this mind of nurturing. For the Tenzo, it might be picking produce from the bin at the market for the next day's meal. Right? It might be preparing a lesson for your class. offering a smile to the haggard barista, or planning a wedding party. All these are opportunities. Nourishing heart is the heart of compassion. It's the bodhicitta, the wisdom and compassion of Avalokiteshvara. Rōshin says Dōgen maintains the three jewels as a parent cares for their child. This idealized parent that Dōgen writes about is us, when we can see the person in front of us, not our idea of that person. When we can encounter the moment as it's arising, without clinging, without pushing away. This is why we practice. In fact, this is the practice. Roshi often points out that many of the East Asian statues of Avalokiteshvara, where she has 1,000 arms and hands, has her holding everyday tools in some of her hands, along with her spiritual implements. And when Sejin and I traveled to Southeast Asia, we saw the same thing. Avalokiteshvara held a writing tool, a pen in one hand, a trowel in another, a ruler, a pot for cooking. This nourishing mind, rōshin, is not something special attained outside of our everyday world. It's who we are when we allow ourselves to truly encounter this moment, and this moment, and this one. And when we allow this to happen, joy arises. Thich Nhat Hanh puts it like this: the present moment is filled with joy and happiness. If you are attentive, you will see it. If you are attentive, you will be it. Dōgen says this joyous heart, this joyous mind, kishin, rejoices and recognizes meaning. Joyful mind, according to Uchiyama Roshi, does not mean a feeling of excitement at the fulfillment of some desire. Rather, joyful mind is discovering one's worth and passion for life through the action of parental mind towards everything we encounter. These three minds are not separate from one another, and they're not separate from you or I. We cannot attain them because they're always available. Dōgen is offering us a practical practice here, the practice of being of service. So I'd like to finish with a Mary Oliver poem that, for me, captures this essence of the three-mind practice, called I Go Down to the Shore. I go down to the shore in the morning, and depending on the hour, the waves are rolling in or moving out. And I say, oh, I am miserable. What should I do? And the sea says in its lovely voice, excuse me, I have work to do. And that's our job. Let's do our work. Thank you for your practice.